I've been working on Hellspawn, a boss fighting bullet hell game mainly inspired by Enter the Gungeon. In the previous videos, I've made this hooded demon fella and a big pyramid boss. Now I'm back with some new progress to show off, so join me as I create a crazy new boss fight. My initial idea is to have an arena with a portal on either end, so different things could teleport from one end to the other. I think that it could make for some unique attacks where enemy bullets go through the portals. I've set up a prototype level to test out my portal idea. For small objects like the player or bullets, I can get away with just teleporting the object from one portal to the other. This seems to work alright, and I think I can build on this idea to make for an interesting boss. So I'm pretty happy with it so far, and I think that
sorry attempt at a portal perfectly matches your sorry excuse for life.
I've got another kinda random idea from what I've seen in the more traditional bullet hell shooters. I like when bullets initially seem impossible to pass through, and then they kinda converge and form a gap for the player. I want to try something similar in my boss fight too. I have this prototype where you can spawn bullets in and choose where the gaps form with the mouse. I made sure to make an adjustable system where I can change how the bullets behave, such as the angle of the bullets or the size of the gap. This kinda turned out to be a fun little minigame. My girlfriend and I would take turns spawning in bullets while the other person tries to dodge them.
This could have been the whole game. This is bullet hell. You didn't need everything else.
When implementing this bullet system, I wanted to try and figure out where I should spawn the bullets so that it would create a gap at a chosen location. I first choose where the safe position should be and how wide of a safety gap it should have. I also choose how far away the bullets should spawn and the angle of their movement. All I need to work out now is how much to offset the bullet's spawn location. I can use a bit of trig to work out that in this case the offset would be 115 units. So starting from the safe positions, I can add these distances to work out that the bullets can be spawned anywhere except between these 2 points. I can do the exact same calculation but flipped, so that bullets move in 2 directions and come together to form a gap. Because the parameters can be played around with, I can try out a huge number of different patterns, experimenting with changing angles or adding randomness. And with this system in place, I want to design a boss where it makes sense to use this kind of attack. I know that my boss will have to work well with this crazy bullet system, and I also want it to interact with the portals in a unique way. I also think that this game could use with a bit of a wholesome twist after some of the weird and creepy bosses from earlier. So I looked online for some reference images, and who am I kidding? You've seen the video thumbnail and title, I'm making a centipede. Initially I had some plans for some sort of brain thing with these little brain capsules, and I scrapped this since it didn't really work well with the portals. I mainly have initial drafts for the centipede boss. I used pictures of centipedes and deep sea fish as reference. The reason I initially wanted to go with a centipede boss is that, well, no matter what game you're making, it just needs to have a centipede. I almost scrapped the entire game just to center it around this boss. Okay, but the actual reason I'm going with a centipede boss was because I think it could be long enough to shoot all these bullets down towards the player. I also think it would be interesting if the centipede crawls through the portals while the player tries to dodge it. So now that I know I'm making a centipede boss, I want to try prototype the centipede's movement system. For this crawling through portal system, I first need to get some movement working for the boss. I'm planning to use paths for the centipede to move along. I can split the centipede up into several components, and have each of these components move along the path. Using paths will also let me easily customize how I want the boss to move through the level. This maybe isn't the best approach, but it's a method that could potentially work, and if it works, then it's the best approach. So I've got some very basic placeholder art for the centipede. It's a bit abstract, you just need to squint your eyes and it'll look better. Here I've split the centipede up into a head, body, and connectors, and these all move along the path. Of course, I'll make the centipede look better later, but this first prototype was just to make sure I can get the centipede moving along a path in the first place.
You know, that sad excuse for a centipede perfectly matches your
Yeah,
sad
okay, we get
excuse
it. Now that I have basic crawling working, the next step is for the centipede to go into one portal and come out the other. I'm already using a very simple approach for teleporting objects from one portal to the other. However, teleporting the centipede will be a lot more difficult to pull off. The player and bullets are so small that I can easily teleport them to the other side. I can't do this with the whole boss, because the boss is way too big. So if you're paying really close attention, you might just be able to tell that I'm moving the centipede to the other side of the screen. I could also teleport each section of the centipede one at a time, but I'm not a huge fan of how this looks. My solution is to clone the centipede. When the original centipede is entering the portal on the left, it looks like it's coming out the other portal at the same time. In reality, we just have two centipedes moving in sync, but the clone is offset. They both move along the same path, but I've just moved the clone over to the right. A problem is that I'll want the centipede to crawl through the portal several times. I'm obviously not going to use a new clone each time the centipede goes through a portal. And I mean it works, but okay, this time I don't think it's the best approach. My solution is to use several paths, all stored in a list. The centipedes both move along the first path in the array. When they reach the end of that path, they switch to the second path, and so on. Here's an in-game view where you can see them reach the end of their path. Then they get moved to new paths, and you can see this a bit more clearly if I color the original centipede green and the cloned centipede purple. I've got a basic system working, but the programmer art is really starting to hurt my eyes. I want to get some decent art prepared, and I need to see if it will look good moving along these paths. I've drawn up a few designs for what the centipede could look like in game, but it's taking a while to close in on a design that I want. A lot of my initial ideas kinda look like garden stepping stones, and most of my initial designs are way too small. I only realized this once I added a player for reference. I also had this design at one point. Oh wait, my bad, that's not a centipede, that's the proportion of viewers that haven't subscribed yet. I also had these designs at some point. It started off just facing to the left. Then I moved on to this symmetrical design. I still wanted to experiment around a bit more, and so the boss became a more interesting asymmetric design. With the improved visuals complete, I need to find out if the visuals will actually look good when moving along a path. I've again split the centipede up into head, body, and connector parts, and now these sections move along the path. I did add a few tweaks, and it could definitely use with some more polish and some more legs, but for now it functions well enough. These visuals also do have some restrictions. It doesn't look quite right if the centipede paths completely change direction, but this is okay since I'm intending for the centipede to only travel to the left. I don't need them doing U-turns or parallel parking or whatever. Along with this crawling system, I also want the centipede to start doing this crazy shooting bullets everywhere attack. The centipede isn't quite wide enough to shoot a bunch of bullets from the top of the screen, so I want it to become a bit longer somehow. I have some draft frames for what the body might look like when it extends itself, and we kinda got an Ouroboros situation going on where the centipede stretches through the portal and bites itself from the other side. As for the body components, I want each component to spread out, and then I have these frames where it stretches out and kinda splits up into this three-hole body thing. But getting this working in game and looking nice and stuff might be a bit of a stretch though. Here it is in game with the stretch frames and some bullets coming out. I'm also experimenting with a ton of different bullet patterns for this attack. This pattern has clear rows of bullets that alternate between moving left and right. This pattern is a lot more dense, so it requires more precise movement. Some patterns have the player constantly moving in the same direction, and this means they sometimes need to run through the portal. And this pattern is called the gaps and bars. It's split into small sections, and the player either has to wait for an opening, or needs to go through the bullets. I'm not really sure which patterns I'll end up using. I have a lot of options, and there's plenty of room to adjust these patterns in the future. I wanted 2 phases for this boss, and couldn't think of how to add more content without wasting too much time. I need to keep the scope small. This means no crazy scenery changes, no giant pyramid transformation, no centipede dating sim. While this centipede was meant to be what the boss starts off like, this ended up becoming phase 2 of the boss fight, and I'm planning to make a smaller centipede with weaker attacks for phase 1. Here are the frames that I've quickly drawn up. It's just the same centipede but smaller, and it only has 1 head. The smaller centipede still crawls through the portals, so I can reuse that system. I've made this big lad a bit stronger so that it shoots bullets while crawling through the portals. Another change is that instead of stretching out to make a huge wall of bullets, the phase 1 boss just stands still and shoots at the player. I made a few different iterations of this attack. Currently the boss aims at the player as regular, and now also sometimes aims at the player through the portal. This is done by aiming at an offset to where the player is. It's kinda like if the player was cloned 500 units away on the left or right, and the centipede is just aiming at these clones. So when the bullets go through the portal, they'll be perfectly aimed at the player. The attack feels a bit confusing and random, and it's not very obvious what's going on with this attack. So I first made the bullets go much faster if they're going through the portal. I then made the normal bullets smaller. This makes it easier to distinguish between what the different bullets are doing. Now that the main systems are in place, it's a good time to really polish up the visuals. It can be quite tempting to get some of this polish done early on, especially if you're trying to show off the development of your game to a couple people on the internet. People normally like to watch videos with nice looking stuff, and of course I'm guilty of trying to do too much polish early on for this reason. Doing this isn't very practical. Lots of stuff is bound to change early on in development, so it can be a waste of time making a bunch of high effort art, only for it to be scrapped later down the line. For this centipede boss, I think I did a much better job at prioritizing which art to make. One of the first animations I worked on was for the stretchy centipede mini bullets attack. This was something that I was quite uncertain about, because I didn't know what it should look like. This includes both a stretch animation and a condense animation, and I think these both turned out good. After getting the attacks done for both phase 1 and phase 2 of the centipede boss, I moved on to making less important animations. Animations that I've been making for phase 1 includes an idle, crawling, and shooting animation. When testing this boss out, I feel that the centipede starts running too suddenly, so I've also made a wind-up animation to warn that the centipede will start moving around. I also can't forget about the transition animation from phase 1 to phase 2. Moving on to phase 2, I drew similar frames for the idle, wind-up, and crawling animations. Drawing these frames is a trade-off between making the boss feel more alive and making me feel more dead inside. I'm also finally adding legs to the centipede, and I'm sure they can stand the weight. Lastly, I'm adding the death animation. I ran into a few bugs. It was just a bit finicky to get everything working well. It was only near the end of developing this boss fight where I actually started fleshing out the environment art. I've gone for some sort of secret underground warehouse or laboratory with simple floor and wall textures and some sort of portal frame. I've been spending a lot of time on the visuals for the portal itself too. The portal is basically a bunch of lights and gradients just stacked up on top of each other. For the stuff emitting from the portal, I'm using moving noise textures which mask out different parts of this gradient. This makes it look like some sort of gas is coming out of the portal. There's a lot of other tiny things that I added to this environment, such as lighting, shadows, and ambient particles, using Godot's particle system. Just all the stuff that you want to add to your game if you want to make up for your half-decent art. Jokes aside, I really like how much the centipede boss and the player stand out against the environment, and I think the visual polish just tied everything together very well. Okay, really quick. This game has 3 bosses right now, and I was planning to release the game with about 3 or 4, so it feels like this game is pretty much done, but I still got a bunch more to do. I've left playtesting way too late, so I'm gonna need to get some private playtesting done. On top of that, I also want to add some sort of map-based level selection, a bunch more sound effects, and some music. A few people actually offered to make music for this game, which I really appreciate, but I'm pretty much making nothing off this game, and I'm trying to keep everything free for both you guys and I. But yeah, there's a lot left to do, and I'm hoping that I can get this game done in mid-2025, especially because I'm at that point where I'm just starting to lose interest in the project, and I kinda want to work on something new. Also, I know the YouTube channel is pretty tiny, but we have a Discord server now. It's literally empty at the moment, but I'm planning to post little updates in there. Feel free to join and chat about anything, show off your games, or post a game suggestion. You can join using the link in the description. Once I'm done working on this game, it will also be available to play for free in the browser through a link in the description. Thanks for watching until the end. If you disliked the video, please smash the dislike button and tell me why the video was bad in the comments below. Alright, I'll see you guys in the next video.